Humans, bears, lions, leopards, and other large carnivores have lived side by side for millennia, and despite their cute and fluffy appearance, these animals are dangerous. Yet the paleobiological record only rarely shows evidence of negative interactions with them. Most of the evidence we do have is limited to tooth marks on isolated human bones. For Neanderthals, there's one known case, a child from Cova Negra, Spain, with carnivore tooth punctures in the skull. For Australopithecines, there are two, the town child with eagle talon punctures, and the Swartkran's skullcap with leopard tooth punctures. Everything else is indirect, gnaw marks that could have come from a carnivore digging up a grave or dragging off someone already dead. For Homo sapiens, actual individuals for which we have definitive proof of an attack by a large carnivore are restricted to one. A single case of an adolescent found buried in Arene Candide Cave in northwestern Italy, known as Il Principe, or the Prince. A recent study analyzed the over 27,000-year-old remains to confirm if this was indeed a carnivore attack. Arene Candide Cave, also known as the Cave of the White Sands, is located in Italy. It's one of the most important archaeological sites in the western Mediterranean, with over 100 burials recovered from within, including Principe. He was discovered in 1942. The young male was about 14 to 17 years old and lived around 27,900 to 27,300 years ago. He lay on his back on a bed of red ochre. Upon his head was a headdress made of hundreds of perforated shells and deer canines. He was buried together with ivory pendants, 4 perforated antlers, and a flint blade clutched in his right hand. From the moment of his discovery, it was clear Principe had suffered a major traumatic event around the time of his death. Field diaries record damage to his left shoulder, a missing portion of his left clavicle, missing portions of his mandible, and damaged vertebrae. Large lumps of ochre had been placed in the gaps left by the missing or damaged bones, possibly in an attempt to cover up his disfiguration or cauterize the wounds. Hypotheses emerged about an attack by a bear or a large cat, possibly during a hunting trip. This became the prevailing narrative in local museums, but the lesions were never fully analyzed in a scientific study. Until now. What they found was devastating. Principe had massive damage to his jaw with large portions completely missing. One of his teeth had fractured, likely from a facial impact. His left clavicle was crushed with broken fragments embedded in newly forming bone tissue, meaning the injury happened while he was still alive. While the upper part of his left arm had been partially destroyed. On the left side of his skull, fractures radiated from a depressed area above the brow and near the back of his head, and parts of his skull had been essentially crushed. Every single one of his cervical vertebrae were fractured, likely from something violently compressing his neck and spine. A groove on his skull likely came from a claw swipe or tooth score, and his right fibula had a tooth puncture. Based on the above, it seemed Principe had been mauled by a large carnivore. Candidates included brown bears, cave bears, leopards, or a cave lion. While tooth punctures from large cats and bears overlap, the grooves on Principe's skull closely resemble bear claw marks found on a hominin skull from Cima de los Huesos and on walls of Basura Cave, only 15 kilometers from Arene Candide. A definitive species ID can't be made without microscopic analysis. However, that would damage the remains. But considering clinical literature describing similar trauma from bear attacks, it seems most likely that a bear was the culprit and the cause of Principe's death. Modern observations show brown bears tend to use face bites when attacking, which results in massive craniofacial trauma, exactly like what we see in Principe. The worst part was, Principe did not die from these injuries. Despite being mauled, he survived, likely only because major blood vessels were missed in the attack. It's estimated he lived for 48 to 72 hours after the mauling, 2 or 3 days in which there was nothing that could be done for him. The ochre found around the wounds may have been used as a cauterizing agent in a desperate attempt to stop the bleeding. Sadly, Principe did not survive. His death was likely caused by secondary brain injury, internal hemorrhaging, or organ failure. Interestingly, despite being known as the Prince, because of his incredibly rich grave goods, more recent observations have noted that Gravettian and Epigravettian burials typically reserve the most elaborate burials not for those of the highest social rank, but for those who suffered traumatic deaths or had congenital conditions. Principe's burial wasn't elaborate because he was elite. It was elaborate because the events around his death were exceptional. This was Archaeology Tea House. If this video was your cup of tea, please like and subscribe and hit that notification bell to never miss a video.